Hi everyone, this time I want to give you a couple of tips for driving smarter during the course of a race. I'm doing so by showing you some situations that I've encountered in a couple of daily races at Suzuka. It's interesting to examine those in detail because those are typical situations where it's easy to get it wrong, and I saw a lot of people getting caught in a mess in similar scenarios. So by showing how I've approached these situations, I will help you to navigate your car in similar conditions. You can see here at 10:15 of this lap that there are two people battling for a position. That's one of the worst places to approach two people battling in front of you because in theory, without anyone around, I could take the next corner flat out with this car. But if I do so, I will end up in the middle of the fight. And since it's very easy that one or two cars will make a mistake, I would like to avoid being collected in a mess. So what I've done instead is to lift the throttle just before the corner, so I could escape in case of any problems. What happens next is that the yellow car has some oversteer, but because I've lifted moments before, I was able to maneuver the car and avoid him just in time. If I was still pushing, I will end up punting him and probably going off track. What I've done after that is to consider that the yellow car was still on the inside and eager to pass me back, and in a position where it's not the normal racing line, I will probably make a mistake. So taking this into account, I'm approaching the Casio triangle a little bit wider than usual. Doing so, I'll give him space in one end, but I'm not doing that just for the sake of sportsmanship. It's also a way to prevent myself from getting punted from him. Although what I haven't considered is the other driver behind that goes full kamikaze and obliterates me. So despite all my efforts, I was still in the gravel, but good news is that it's still the beginning of the race. So that's another good reason to prefer longer races compared to the sprint ones. Anyway, there was nothing I could have done about it, as I was already turning and I didn't even have time to notice him. For the record, I will end up ahead of this guy, by the way. Here instead, I would like to talk about communicating with your opponent using car positioning. I didn't have a great exit of the corner, and I knew that the car behind wasn't about to overtake, but at least was about to get close to me a little bit. This corner is notorious for a lot of dive bombs, so what I've done is to place my car somewhat defensively before going to the hairpin. The guy, even if he gained on me, he wasn't that close, but again, when you leave the door open in those types of corners, people tend to be a little bit greedy, just a tiny bit, and especially during the end of the race. By positioning the car there, I'm basically telling the guy behind, hey, don't even think about it. It's good to stress that this wasn't too much a move to defend from a pass, but to prevent a move from even happening. So I've used the same tactic later before Spoon. My car is positioned in the middle of the track before the actual curve. Then I'm going back to a somewhat normal racing line. The principle here is to defend before the curve itself, because defending later means to have the car closer and to compromise your racing line even further. Again here, second to last lap. This driver is definitely putting pressure on me. I knew I was losing through the S's and that the next corner after Dunlop would have been a potential opportunity if I considered the inside. Again, I decided to be defensive not at that curve specifically, but a corner before, so Dunlop. I've done that by following the natural shape of the corner. Another thing that needs to be pointed out is that I was able to do that because it was still somewhat a car length distance. If it was closer, my maneuver could have been considered blocking, but because it was a tiny bit behind and the natural shape of the curve also pushed me towards that direction, I was able to keep myself on the inside in the next right-hander and keep my opponent on the outside. This clip is to illustrate when you can move lines and when instead might be considered blocking. I got a terrible exit of the corner, but because in this case the driver behind was way too close, I couldn't cover the inside line at the beginning, because otherwise that could have been considered blocking. I was very lucky that when the car pulls on the side, the absence of slipstream is slowing down significantly. This meant that now I got the speed advantage. He tagged behind me once again, and only then I moved on the inside. The distance is similar from before, but at the beginning he was gaining ground, but now he's not. Now he's losing ground. This allowed me to move line without blocking. Another reason why I consider this a fair move is also because it was long before the braking zone. The same move a few meters later, that would have been, let's say, less orthodox. Always for the series allow extra space to survive, there's this scenario where there's a car in front just came off road and was off the racing line. Of course, I approached him with intention to pass him, but extra caution in those cases is always needed because in this situation it's very easy to go a bit wide. On top of that, we were about to approach the corner pretty much at the same time. The point here is that even though you can see the prey in front of you, be always patient and cautious. If you are too greedy, best case scenario, you will pass the guy. But in the worst case scenario, you wreck yourself. If instead you're patient, it's a tiny bit more difficult to pass the guy, but in the worst case scenario, you will still have your position. There's more to lose and pretty much the same to gain. So my plan was simple, trying to keep my line and hope that the speed advantage will place my car in a position of advantage. Because it's on the inside, I needed to go on the outside. Right before the hairpin, there's a right-hander that makes the things a little bit more difficult, because going there full throttle means that the centrifugal force will push me on the inside right before the corner, and that's not desirable when there's another car there. So what I did to ensure my camera line? The usual thing, leave the throttle a bit before the curb and leave the space on the inside to avoid contact. The speed difference allowed me to stay on the outside and keep the move clean. I want to end this video by showing what happened straight after with the two cars behind me after the hairpin. It's very interesting because it shows you what happens when you're not positioning yourself in advance. We can see that the car in front of him doesn't defend in advance when the opponent is gaining ground, even though it was still behind. The car behind then he gains even more ground because of the slipstream, so the position of the car in front plus the speed difference gives confidence to the driver that pulls on the inside that spoon. The move from him was then very clumsy and the result is what we expect. Now, the blue car has all the reasons in the world to curse the entire universe and throwing F-bombs to the other driver, but a thing like that could have been avoided if it was defensive way in advance before it was even closer. And I have a proof of that. Here's the same driver approaching me at the same corner at lap 3. If you look at my position, you will spot the difference. Even though he got the same speed advantage, because of my position he had less slipstream and eventually less confidence to even start thinking about passing. My prevention there was so effective that in the end I came back to normal racing line because I was sure that it was not going to attempt to pass there. That pretty much wraps up for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Till the next time.